Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silver Mont, and this is my review of Nioh 2 on PC. If you're getting deja vu, that's because I reviewed the game back at PS4 release, and back then I said I'll review the game again, or its DLC, with PC release, so here we are. If you're interested in my general thoughts on the base game, you can check that video out. Today we'll be focusing more on the PC release, specifically, as well as the DLC. On PS4, I received a review copy for free. Obviously, this was before any of the DLC was out. As for this PC version, I bought the game with my own money, as I wanted to play through the game again, only this time with friends. And also do the DLC, of course. So this time, it isn't a sponsored review or anything, just to get those disclaimers out of the way. As with Nioh 1's PC version, Nioh 2 on PC comes with all of the DLC included. You'll also get a bizarre Valve helmet that is strapping an RGB keyboard to your head. I wouldn't advise that for protection, but hey, if it works, I guess. There is ultra-wide support and a decent range of PC options to tweak graphics, frame rate, and all that. As for performance, I personally had no issues with it after the first patch. Prior to that, there were some issues with particle effects causing frame rate dips. Some people are still having those, such as when you roll into barrels causing them to explode. Unfortunately, the most recent patch, at time of writing, has somewhat broken the game, when prior to that it was running just fine for me. Something in this latest patch has been causing loads of crashes, as in multiple crashes per play session. And it seems to have something to do with how the text is being passed or displayed, I think. It also causes UI elements to vanish, partially or entirely, which is often a precursor to a crash. Fortunately, these crashes don't happen in missions for the most part, at least they haven't for me or my friends. But when you're on the map screen, or in the blacksmith, it happens a lot. It's frustrating, and hopefully by the time you're watching this video, they've either reverted that patch or released a new one to fix it, because it's irritating. Hasn't resulted in, like, huge loss of progression, maybe 5 minutes of smithing, but it's annoying. In general though, aside from that issue, it's a good PC port. I would definitely say that controllers are important. If you want to play this game, you're going to want a controller. Playing it on a keyboard would not feel good, I think. Dark Souls never felt great on a keyboard, and this is a lot more complex than Dark Souls in terms of button combinations and whatnot. Before we touch on the DLC, how has the base game changed in the year since release? Well, if you remember, my main complaints about the base game were the snake boss was too early into the game for the challenge it presented, soul cores felt kinda useless, and the visual design of levels was rather bland. While the snake boss is still placed weirdly early into the game for how difficult he is, I feel like they might have nerfed him, or maybe I just retained my knowledge and muscle memory from a year ago better than I thought. That said, he still presents the same situation. Fighting him early in the game is hard only because you don't really have the tools to deal with him. Fighting him in New Game Plus or at the end of the game, he's a pushover really, as you have the tools and the soul cores and whatnot to manage him. As for soul cores, they nerfed the snake one, I believe. I don't know if any others were improved, or maybe I just got better at utilising them, but I've been able to get a lot more use out of them this time. So I don't know if that's just me learning to use them better or what. Although my complaint about Living Weapon remains. They keep the mechanic from the first game, but they toned it down a lot, and it feels kind of pointless now. Indeed, Guardian Spirits are very underwhelming in Nioh 2. Probably because you have those, and Soul Cores. I would have been fine if they just removed Guardian Spirits entirely and went all in on Yokai Shift and Soul Cores. I mean, why not just replace Guardian Spirits with the Yokai Soul Cores? They could have been the same kind of thing. But that leads us nicely into the DLC. Some of the DLC levels were nice changes from, oh look, it's a pagoda or a temple or a shrine again. There are 3 DLCs. They bring with them 2 new weapons, new soul cores, new skills, and of course new bosses and levels. The nice thing is you can use the new weapons from the start of the game. The fists and the split staff are both incredibly powerful. Do you remember Nioh 1, how the Odachi sort of made the axe redundant when it was added in the first DLC? I think. It essentially did everything the axe did, but better. The fists kind of do that with the tonfa, actually kind of with everything. If I had to rate weapons in terms of sheer strength, the fists would probably be the number one option. They are absolutely insane. You can become a never-ending cyclone of key-breaking destruction. You can charge up a single hit that obliterates in one punch. Man, they are obscenely strong. They do everything that every other weapon can do. The only real issue I guess you could say they have is they don't have, that much range. But who needs range when you can suddenly rocket forwards 5 feet with a jumping kick? That's your range right there. As for the split staff, it feels a bit gimmicky to play for me. A lot of their strength seems to just come from active skills that last for 5 minutes and do 999 hits. But they're both cool weapons and good additions to the game. Indeed, every weapon in Nioh 2 feels pretty good, and the game is well balanced in that you can put a lot of time into any of the weapons and be very effective with them. Even though I say fists are the best, and they're better than the tonfa, that doesn't mean the tonfas are bad by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, even perhaps the worst weapons in the game, the hatchets and the axe, they feel a little underwhelming compared to some of the other weapons, but that's not to say they are bad. They just need a little love and a touching up to make them feel more uniquely strong in what they represent, I suppose. And it's hard to talk about the DLC without spoilers, but I think the first two are the best in terms of bosses. The featured boss fight in each of them is a lot of fun. The bosses in the last DLC were kind of underwhelming for me. Perhaps because it's fighting someone we already fought, like, twice in the main game, or maybe more, I forget. Now we're fighting them 2 more times. In general, I do think the DLCs are good additions to the game, but the story's a little bizarre, and I think the first game's DLC, well, they wrapped things up better. But I know what you're thinking. Oh, in the first game you fight Yukimura Sanada like 2-3 times. Yeah, that is true, but it felt, I don't know. I just feel like the boss fights were just better in that DLC. Because with the story as well, I mean, I don't even know what was really going on in the DLC story for Nioh 2, honestly. I'm not a huge fan of time travel. Whilst it was nice to go back and see other periods of Japanese history, so to speak, the story wrapping it all together just felt bad. It's like, hey, we beat the final boss. Let's go back in time and beat him again. I'm just not a huge fan of how that panned out. I'd rather do something that feels like it's more meaningful to the story instead of, hey, let's go and beat up this guy again after listening to him talk about stuff. I just never really found the yokai parts of the story all that interesting in Nioh 1 and 2. See, in Nioh 1, they are used more as like background things. Edward Kelly is using the yokai and all of this just to continue the war so he can keep grabbing Amrita. But this time they're like front and center on the yokai stuff, going all in, and I just don't really care about it that much. It's the human element I enjoyed. The Hideyoshi stuff I liked a lot more. All in all, I can definitely suggest Nioh 2. If you're playing through it once, you'll get a lot of bang for your buck, as they say. If you're planning on going through the 3 or 4 New Game Plus cycles, well, you'll get a lot more if you want to actually get into the end game, which is still very, very grindy. Grindy for gear, that is. The only real caveat I have is that the current patch has balked the game. But as mentioned, I imagine they'll fix that soon. In terms of games that are giving a similar experience to Dark Souls, Nioh remains my favourite. Just remember, if you are going into Nioh from Dark Souls, don't play it like Dark Souls. You need to get used to changing stance, key pulsing, fluxing, and all that. If you're gonna look at it and say, well, I just want to play this like I'm gonna play Dark Souls, just go and play Dark Souls again. You'll enjoy it more than trying to turn Nioh into Dark Souls. And yes, I would still consider it a Dark Souls clone, but that's just because I don't like the term Souls-like. It sounds like a very manufactured and business-like term, when there is nothing wrong with calling it a Souls clone. We've been doing stuff like that since the 90s with Doom clone. It's a little tangent, but it's the same thing with MOBAs. I hate the term MOBA. Just call your game a Dota clone if it's a Dota clone. It's good to recognise that Nioh has a lot of the same DNA as Souls. Gameplay-wise, if you play it exactly like Dark Souls and you don't adopt to the new mechanics, you'll not enjoy the experience, in my opinion. But hey, if you want to get engrossed, you can get hundreds of hours out of Nioh 2, keeping you occupied until Elden Ring comes out in 2025. In summary though, I think Nioh 2 is great. If you haven't tried it, check it out. I would suggest doing the first game first, especially as both are on Steam now. Until next time though, you guys take care. Ciao.